Hello, everybody, and welcome to part 2 of Minerva Keen's Detective Club. Let's pick up where we left off and continue. Chapter 31. Before school on Thursday, Heck left early to deliver his cookies to the old lady on the 11th floor. He had baked 12 different batches, from chocolate chip to coconut cranberry walnut to one that had dried pineapple and chopped jalapeno peppers. "I call that one the Keen surprise," he said. I hoped the old lady's sense of taste was as bad as her hearing. Once he was out the door, I FaceTimed Mom and Dad. I had an important question to ask, and I didn't want Heck distracting anyone. The first thing I saw when the call connected was Dad's face dripping with sweat. And I saw Mom holding a racket. They were outside on a tennis court. "We'll have to keep this brief, Minerva," said Dad. "Your mother and I are tied at one set apiece, and we only have the court for another 30 minutes. "Don't you guys ever work?" I asked. "Intellectuals don't always work 9 to 5, Minerva," said Mom. "Heck thinks you guys are secret agents," I told him. After all, you're gone all the time, and nobody really understands what you do." Dad and Mom looked at each other and then burst out laughing. They were laughing a little too hard, if you ask me. "What's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard?" said Dad, after he caught his breath. "Where is Heck, anyway?" asked Mom. "Delivering cookies. It's his new business, even though he only has one customer." "Good for him," said Dad. "I like his hustle." "Well, I have a job too," I informed them. "I'm helping Detective Taylor. There have been 2 more poisonings in the building since Kermit. One of our neighbors even died." "I hope you're getting paid," said Mom. "It's not really a job unless you're getting paid for your work." "Tell Heck to send us some cookies," said Dad, looking like he was practically drooling. I couldn't believe it. My mom was asking about money, and my dad was more concerned about cookies than murders happening in our very own building. "Don't you think Heck, Busy, and I should move out until the case is solved?" I asked. "I think we're in danger." Dad sighed. "Let's look at this rationally. Out of the approximately 200 people living in our building, 3 have been poisoned, 1 fatally, that we know of," I interrupted. "Meaning you have a 0.015% chance of being poisoned yourself, and a 0.005% chance of being fatally poisoned. Those are very low odds." It was always hard to argue when he started throwing numbers around. "Has Detective What's-His-Name told you to move out?" asked Mom. I shook my head. "Not yet." "Then listen to your father," she said. "It's still extremely unlikely you'll be poisoned." "Not in our building it isn't," I said. "Just keep your wits about you and you'll be fine," said Dad, spinning his tennis racket impatiently. "We raised you to take care of yourself. Now, if you'll excuse me, it's my turn to serve to your mother." We ended the call. Maybe Heck was right and they were secret agents after all. Who also act like a 1 in 200 chance of getting fatally poisoned was no big deal. Chapter 32. A cartoon was playing on the whiteboard at the front of the classroom. I watched as a stick figure lady uncapped a ball of bleach and poured some of it into her mop bucket. Then she dumped in some ammonia. Stink lines rose out of the bucket, followed by a bunch of green frowny faces that I guess were supposed to be gas bubbles. The cartoon lady looked surprised, then her eyes turned from O's to X's and she keeled over. "Danger under the sink," said the video's narrator in a deep, dramatic voice. "Common household cleaners such as bleach and ammonia can create deadly toxic gas." "I think I smell some toxic gas right now," said the kid in front of me, making a farting sound. Or maybe it was an actual fart. Either way, everyone laughed, except me. I was bored out of my mind. Sure, chloramine gas was deadly, but it was easy to avoid, and only a bonehead was going to drink drain cleaner, weed killer, bug spray, or any of the other chemicals the narrator had warned us about. What I needed was information on the exotic poisons used in our building. It's against the rules to use a phone in class, but whoever wrote the rules obviously wasn't thinking about murder cases. Keeping mine in my lap, I started Googling as fast as I could. Soon I had forgotten there was even a movie playing. When the video ended, Mr. Boomershine turned the lights back on. "Any questions?" he asked. Mr. Boomershine is the health and PE teacher, and he also coaches the football, basketball, and soccer teams. His voice has only one volume level. Really loud. I raised my hand. "Will there be a unit on exotic poisons?" "What do you mean by exotic poisons, Minerva?" Mr. Boomershine boomed. "You know, like botulinum, ricin, anthrax, and sarin," I said. "Everything from lab-created neurotoxins to naturally occurring poisons in animals. Did you know some frogs are so poisonous you could get paralyzed just by touching them? I had learned a lot in the last 15 minutes. Mr. Boomershine stared at me. Everyone else is staring at me too. No! We will not be discussing those poisons in class, he said. Don't drink bleach and you should be fine. Shouldn't we be educated on all poisons just to be safe? I argued. We do not have to worry about poison frogs in Chicago, shouted Mr. Boomershine. But how do you know? I asked. I'd be more worried about poison rats if I were you, said the kid from me. There are way more rats in Chicago than frogs. You can stop talking now, I told him as I shuddered. It was bad enough knowing there were rats in Chicago without having to worry about poisonous ones. After class, I texted Detective Taylor. Have you identified the poisons used billing yet? We're still working on it, he wrote back. All we know so far is that each one was different. Where does the poison even come from? I asked. Solve that, and we solve the case, wrote Detective Taylor. Chapter 33. Hello? Is anybody home? Hello? I banged my fist on the elegant front doors of the Arcanum, but nobody answered. Cupping my hands around my eyes, I squinted through the glass and saw that Oscar wasn't at his desk. Here's the thing about living in a building with a doorman. He opens the door for you, which is nice, especially when your hands are full. But if he needs to step away, he locks the doors to make sure nobody comes in and robs the place. And even though we weren't robbers, now we couldn't get in either. Heck, and I never carry front door keys because we have a doorman. I pulled on the big brass handles one last time, but the doors wouldn't budge. Then I turned around and shrugged at Heck and Santos. I guess he isn't there, I said. That's weird, said Heck. I can't remember the last time Oscar was gone when I got home. Maybe he had to go to the bathroom, said Santos. Santos had become a regular blabbermouth ever since joining the detective club. Around other people, he was still about as talkative as the mailbox. But he acted differently with us. He had discovered that his vocal cords worked, and he liked using them too. You're probably right, I told Santos. While we waited for Oscar to finish his business, Santos and I watched Heck to try to jump over the fire hydrant on a skateboard. Santos thought he would make it eventually, but I thought Heck would probably end up with a cast in his other arm too. Neither of us ended up being right. 10 minutes later, we were still stuck outside. I'll check the back door, Heck volunteered. He pushed off and clickety-clacked down the sidewalk on his skateboard. As soon as he turned the corner, the front doors opened, but they weren't opened up by Oscar, holding them wide and grinning at us like he always did. Instead, a wild-eyed woman ran right into us, knocking us over like bowling pins. By the time I got back on my feet, she was halfway down the block. Stop! I yelled. She glanced over her shoulder and kept going. I don't think she could have run any faster if she was being chased by hungry cheetahs. I pulled out my phone to take her picture, but she was already too far away. Who was she? Chapter 34. Santos caught the doors before they slammed shut and locked again. Was that one of your neighbors? He asked. I've never seen her before, I told him. The way she had run out of the building definitely seemed suspicious, so I opened my notebook and wrote out everything I could remember about her. I hadn't gotten a good look at her face, but I knew she had curly hair and glasses. She was wearing a dark blue shirt, gray sweatpants, and white gym shoes. Gym shoes are an excellent choice if you're planning to want to run away from the scene of a crime. You better find Oscar, I said. He wasn't in the entryway, the lounge, or the atrium. Santos even looked in the men's bathroom, but there were no signs of life on the entire first floor. Dolores DeWitt's door was closed, but I doubt Oscar would have been in her office. He didn't like her any more than I did. And I remembered something. In addition to opening the front doors and signing for packages, it was also Oscar's duty to empty the lobby trash cans to the dumpsters in the basement. What if he was lying at the bottom of the stairs with a broken leg? I led Santos to the basement door and opened it. Their narrow wooden staircase was so dimly lit that we could hardly see the bottom. You first, I told Santos. He shook his head. I'm afraid of the dark, remember? Well, I'm afraid of rats. Oscar told me he saw a rat down there. He's your doorman, said Santos. I don't have a doorman, but if I did, I would definitely go looking for him. I swallowed hard and put my foot on the first step. When a rat didn't bite my toes off, I kept going. The Arcanum has marble floors, fancy fireplaces, and crystal chandeliers. But the basement seems like it belongs to a different building. The floor is hard-packed dirt, the furnace looks like it could come to life and eat you, and the only light comes from a couple of ancient light bulbs dangling from the ceiling. If a Hollywood director wants to film a horror movie in Chicago, I've got the perfect place. Oscar, are you down there? I called. My voice disappeared into the darkness. I didn't even hear an echo. Then, above us, there was a rattle like something was falling 100 miles an hour, and a deafening bang when it landed. It sounded like a loaded dishwasher falling into the back of a dump truck. Santos and I both screamed and tried to jump into each other's arms, meaning we crashed down into each other and fell down. What was that? Whispered Santos. Just a bag of trash, I said as my terror slowly turned to relief. It must have been dropped into the garbage chute by someone on a high floor. The bag had landed so hard, it was a miracle it hadn't exploded on impact, spraying us with wet coffee grounds and soggy banana peels. I won't tell anyone we screamed if you won't, I told Santos as we dusted ourselves off and stood up, but I knew my secret was safe. He wasn't selling Santos for nothing. As we started walking toward the dumpsters, I listened hard, hoping I wouldn't hear another garbage bomb screaming down towards us. I burped so deeply I could taste the cheese sandwich I had for lunch. Santos stepped backward, waving the smell away with his hand. I can't help it, I said. I burp when I'm nervous. Then, from the darkness, we heard someone else burp. Oscar, I called. Is that you? It was completely silent, so silent that I burped again, even louder this time, and tasted the strawberry yogurt I ate for breakfast. I turned on my cell phone's flashlight and started inching toward where I had first heard the answering burp. Santos let me go first, using me as a human shield. The bright white flashed on the blue dumpsters and a tiny shape on the floor in front of them. When the tiny shape moved, my heart almost stopped. Is that a rat? I whispered. Santos peered out from behind me. I think it's a frog. What would a frog be doing down here? The frog hopped away and disappeared behind the dumpsters. We followed, trying to get a better look. And then we saw it. A pair of shoes. And not just any shoes. Oscar's shoes. With Oscar's feet in them. Oscar was lying as still as death. I screamed and dropped my phone. Santos fainted and fell over. And when my phone hit the floor, the light went out. Chapter 35. I tried not to panic as I searched the dirt floor for my phone. Even though there was a dim glow from a faraway light bulb, I couldn't see it anywhere. I must have accidentally tapped the flashlight button before I dropped it. Finally, I found it. Under Santos. I shook him, but he didn't move. I dialed 911 with quivering fingers, but I had 0 bars and the call didn't go through. Leaving Santos and Oscar, I sprinted across the basement floor, reached up the rickety stairs, and ran smack into Dolores Glowwit. What were you doing downstairs? She demanded. I just found Oscar, I told her. Something was wrong with him. Instead of asking what was wrong, she glared at me and said, You just love trouble, don't you? Then she steered me into a chair and pushed me down so hard, it was like she was trying to close a suitcase with too much stuff in it. Sit right there and don't move, she snarled as she dialed 911 from the front desk. Even though I hated to leave Santos and Oscar in the basement, I felt too afraid to go back down there. What if a frog jumped out at me? Or a rat bit me? What if a murderer murdered me? But if my friends were in danger, I just couldn't sit in the lobby having a stare down with Dolores. When she put the phone down, I stood up. I'm going to check on Santos and Oscar, I said. Dolores shoved me back into the chair. You've gotten into enough trouble for one day. I kept standing up, and she kept pushing me down until an ambulance screeched to a halt outside. The brother and sister EMT team hurried in. What is going on in this building? Asked Big Joan. I'd like to know that myself, said Dolores, looking at me like she was the judge, jury, and couldn't wait to play executioner. When they came back upstairs, Santos was strapped onto the gurney. His eyes were still closed. He just passed out, said Little John. He's going to be fine. That's my friend Santos. The real victim's behind the dumpsters, I told them. Big John and Little John looked at each other like they were thinking, just how many bodies are in this building? Well, we better wake this one up, because we only bought one gurney, said Big Joan. She broke a capsule of smelling salts under Santos's nose, and his eyes popped open like someone had poured ice water in his underwear. Little John started questioning Santos. What's your name, kid? Do you remember what day it is? This is the President of the United States. Santos just looked at him and didn't answer. Little John shook his head sadly. He's lost the ability to speak. He's fine, I said. He just doesn't like to talk to people he doesn't know. If you're finished messing around, you might want to go back downstairs, Dolores said impatiently. There's a dead man down there. Santos climbed out of the gurney and sat down next to me, checking himself for bruises. I don't think I like being a detective, he said. As the EMTs went back down to the basement, I turned to Dolores. How do you know Oscar's dead? He could just be passed out like Santos was. She stabbed her finger at me like she wanted to poke my eye out. Because everywhere you go, you leave bodies behind. Like they were her proving point, Big John and Little John came slowly up the stairs. They looked sad and serious. I saw Oscar's shoes sticking out from under the sheet, and the sheet was pulled over his head. Case files. Name: Oscar Blasowski. Occupation: doorman. Relationship to case: he saw everyone coming and going from the building. Did he know something he never got to tell us? Hair: blonde, flat as a table on top. Eyes: blue, very friendly. Age: too young to get poisoned. Identifying characteristics: wore a suit jacket with the Arcanum stitched onto the pocket. Personality: friendly and trustworthy. Habits, behavior, and special talents: knew what you needed before you did. If it was going to rain, he handed you an umbrella on your way out to the door. Detective's notes: it's not easy to be cheerful when your job is opening doors, signing for deliveries, and carrying groceries, but Oscar sure made it look easy. He even made it look easy getting along with Dolores DeWitt, something most people would find impossible. I mean, how many people work for someone who's basically a witch? Some Arcanum residents treat him like part of the furniture, but not me. We were friends. I always remember my birthday, March 15th, so I made sure to remember his, September 29. But he'll never have another birthday. He always said, if you want to see the rainbow, you gotta put up with the rain. Do you know who said that originally? Dolly Parton. Oscar was a secret country music fan. Chapter 36. I stood on the sidewalk in front of our building with Santos, watching as the EMTs loaded Oscar into the ambulance. For once, Big Joan didn't burn rubber when she drove away. She just eased out into traffic without even bothering to turn on the siren and flashing lights. Poor Oscar was dead. Well, I guess you're happy now, said Dolores behind me. He was my friend, I said, wiping tears off my cheeks. What is wrong with you? She shrugged. Nothing, as long as you don't poison me, too. Detective Taylor pulled up to the curb and double parked. He was driving a black, unmarked car. He probably didn't have to worry about a ticket. How did Detective Taylor get here so fast? I asked. I called him, said Dolores smugly. He gave me his card. That hurt. Why would he give her his phone number too? I was his partner, not Dolores. Detective Taylor crossed the sidewalk towards us. I hope you're ready to arrest this girl, announced Dolores. I don't know how she's doing it, but every time she shows up, somebody drops dead. Don't listen to her. She's crazy, I told him. We saw somebody run out of the building right before we found Oscar. Detective Taylor held out his hands like he was directing traffic. Hold on and let me do my job, both of you. Miss DeWitt, will you please return to your office until I finish interviewing Minerva and Santos? I will not, she said defiantly. I'm going to stay right here to make sure she tells you the truth. I guess you don't mind letting Minerva sit in while I question you, said Detective Taylor. Apparently Dolores did mind, because she finally left. Santos looked like he wished he had his own office to go to. Detective Taylor took us inside and asked us to sit down in the lounge. I noticed he was wearing a tie I had seen before, the ketchup and mustard one. I'm truly sorry to hear about Oscar, he said. Are you both okay? Of course not, I said, wondering if detectives like him ever got used to seeing so many horrible things. You don't really believe Dolores, do you? Put her out of your mind for now. Just start from the beginning and tell me what happened, said Detective Taylor. I took a deep breath and got ready to tell him everything we'd seen since we came home from school. Before I could even say one word, I started crying. I'm not talking about a couple of teardrops or a few sniffles, either. I bawled like a baby until I was hiccuping snot out of my nose. It was embarrassing, but I just couldn't stop. First Kermit, then Serenity, then Mr. Park, and now Oscar. Oscar, who had been the building storeman since I was a little kid. He just didn't deserve to be poisoned. None of them did. Why was it happening? When would it all end? Take your time, Minerva, said Detective Taylor, offering me a box of Kleenex he found on Oscar's desk. When I realized it was Oscar's personal box of Kleenex, I only cried harder. Even Santos was crying a little, silently, of course. By the time I was done, I had used half of the box of tissues, and Detective Taylor's crime scene crew had arrived. One of them, a sharp guy with a pointy beard, was a sketch artist. I described the woman we had seen run out of the building, and Santos nodded agreement or shook his head when he thought I was wrong. Soon the sketch artist had finished a drawing that looked just like her. "Do you think that's the killer?" asked Detective Taylor. "Let's not jump to conclusions," he warned me. "We have to find her first." Just then, I heard the clickety-clack of Heck's skateboard moving towards us from the back of the building. Heck zoomed out of the atrium with a red-faced cop running after him in hot pursuit. She caught up just as he tail-scraped to a stop. "I found this kid trying to break in through the back door," said the cop, breathing hard. "It's okay. He lives here," Detective Taylor told her. "What'd I miss?" asked Heck as the cop threw up her hands in frustration. I didn't know where to start. "Minerva, would you leave me with Heck and Santos, please?" asked Detective Taylor. "I'd like to question you all individually before I speak with Dolores." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own partner was shutting me out. Chapter 37. I was so angry that I stomped out of the Arcanum. After everything I had done to prove myself, why was Detective Taylor pushing me away? Had he changed his mind and decided I might be guilty after all? Before I knew it, I was halfway due to Sable Hospital. I decided to check on Kermit again to see if he was getting better. I didn't know what I would do if I found out he was getting worse. I hurried up to his room. His eyes were still closed, but his breathing was regular, and the doctors didn't seem to have plugged any more tubes and wires into him. A glance at the chessboard told me he had woken up and moved again, and now I saw what he was trying to do. The last time, I had moved my other knight to protect my king. In response, he had bought out his queen, targeting the same pawn as his bishop. He was trying to force me into a scholar's mate and end the game. But he must have been delirious, because he should have known I would never fall for something that simple. Leaving his room, I finally noticed Rosalie at her station. "Kermit keeps moving his chess pieces," I told her. She smiled. "Well, that's a good sign, right? It means he's waking up. It would be a good sign if he was playing well, but he's playing like he has no idea what he's doing. What if he never gets better? He's been through a lot, Minerva, and he's very old and sick. Be patient." "Are you sure no one else is moving for him?" I asked. Nurse Rosalie nodded her head firmly. 100% sure. I've asked, and none of the other nurses play chess either. I went back to Kermit's room. I had tears in my eyes as I moved my queen out to attack. "Please wake up and get better," I begged. But the old man slumbered on. Chapter 38. The street lights winked on as I started walking home. Dark clouds crowded the evening sky. Far away, I heard a rumble that was longer and louder than an L train. Thunder. My phone rang. Detective Taylor was calling. "Why did you talk to Santos and Heck without me?" I asked when I answered. "Don't you trust me anymore?" Detective Taylor chuckled. "Of course I still trust you. I just wanted to get their stories in their own words without you doing the talking for them. I'm driving Santos home now." Well, that was a relief. "What did Dolores tell you?" I asked. She'd ID'd the sketched. She said, "The woman is a housekeeper just came to the building 2 weeks ago, so she couldn't have done the poisonings. She was running because she was late for her bus." Big raindrops started splatting on the sidewalk. I was about to get soaked. There must be lots of cleaning ladies and dog walkers who visit the building every day. What about them? I asked. "I already thought of that," said Detective Taylor. "I had my team go over the visitor's log, but none of the cleaners or dog walkers were at the building for every incident, and none of them had the key to any of the victims' apartments. Then, as the rain really started to pour, headlights flashed and a car pulled over next to me. Santos was waving at me from the front seat, and Detective Taylor was behind the wheel. "Get in. I'll give you a ride home, too," he said, lowering the window. I climbed into the back seat and rode along as he dropped off Santos, who only grunted when I said, "See you at school tomorrow." Then I rode to the front seat on the way back to the Arcanum. "It's driving me crazy how Dolores keeps trying to blame me for everything," I complained. "Well, you have to admit, you do keep turning up at the scene of the crime," said Detective Taylor. I slapped the dashboard. "Maybe it's her. Think about it. She's been in the building every single time, she has keys to every door, and she's definitely mean enough to poison people. If you were the killer, wouldn't you try to make someone else look guilty?" "I suppose," he said thoughtfully. "Also, She seemed to know how Oscar was dead already, but I didn't know that until the EMTs brought him upstairs. Detective Tiro pulled in front of the Arcanum and left the engine running. His windshield wipers could hardly keep up with the rain. And if all that is true, people don't usually poison multiple victims for no reason at all, he said. And I'll get laughed off the police force if I arrest someone just for being mean. What's her motive, Minerva? I didn't have an answer for that. Chapter 39. Back from the police station, sneered Dolores. I guess he decided not to arrest you. Yet. Dolores, of all people, was holding the door open for me. She had seen me get out of Detective Taylor's car. He'd give me a ride in the front seat, I told her. When it's your turn, you'll be riding in the back wearing handcuffs. He'll find out your secret soon enough, said Dolores. I don't have any secrets, I said, as I walked past her. In fact, maybe we should call a reporter to tell them what's happening. Maybe if the TV news did a big story about the poisonings at the Arcanum, it would help us solve the case. Dolores turned pale. She closed the door so fast I had to jump out of my way so it didn't hit me in the butt. Does that make you nervous? I asked. Don't you dare call a reporter, she said, shaking her finger at me. Bad publicity is bad for the building. Bad for you, I mean. Bad for you, you mean, I said over my shoulder. By the way, your doorman skills need work. I'm just filling in for Oscar until a tap arrives, she yelled. In the atrium, I saw people setting up rows of chairs like they were getting ready for a meeting. A sign by the elevator explained, Candlelight Vigil tonight. Please join us at 8 p.m. this evening for a candlelight vigil to honor your Arcanum neighbors who have recently passed away or fallen ill. Frederick Frizzle, President, Arcanum Co-op Board. I was glad to know someone in charge cared about Kermit, Serenity, Young Jay, and Oscar, because Dolores obviously didn't. Chapter 40. My first thought when I walked through the door of our apartment was that we had been robbed. All the cabinet doors were hanging open, and all the drawers had been pulled out. Some of them were even lying on the floor. My second thought was that we'd been hit by a tornado, because the stuff that had been in the cabinets and drawers were scattered all over the floor. I ruled out the tornado first. I hadn't heard a tornado siren, and besides, it seemed unlikely that one would have come through our apartment without damaging the rest of the building. The real culprit was in our living room. Heck walked like a maniac on an Easter egg hunt. While I watched, he searched inside the TV cabinet, under the couch, and even behind the books in the bookcase. We can't go to candle vigil light without any candles, he said. Do you know where you have any? No, I told him. Did you ask Busy? She's helping me look. I found Busy in the kitchen, where she was taking cans out of the pantry one at a time and stacking them on the counter. Did you find any? I asked. Any what? She said. Candles. Busy stared at the can of tomato soup in her hand and then burst out laughing. I had completely forgotten what Heck asked me to look for. But did you know that some of this food is past its expiration date? Some of our neighbors are past their expiration dates too, I thought. In the other room, Heck yelled, Booyah! And a moment later, he came flying into the kitchen in his socks. Pushing Busy's cans out of the way, he dumped an armload of stuff onto the kitchen counter. I can't find a candle, but I have an idea that might be even better, he said. I found this bottle in the recycling bin. We could fill it with the lighter fluid I found in this hardware closet. Then all we have to do is stuff the solar rag into a bottle to make a wick. Light it, and voila! Instant oil lamp. I stared at him in horror. I expected Busy to shut him down, but she only nodded. In my freshman anthropology class, I learned that people have made simple lamps like this for thousands of years. I couldn't take any more. Are you both bonkers? I asked. That's not a lamp. That's a Molotov cocktail. If we take that downstairs, we'll set the whole building on fire. While Busy and Heck googled Molotov cocktail, I took one last look around the apartment for a candle. On the dusty fireplace of Dad's study, I found a massive pillar candle with 4 wicks, one for each of the poisoning victims. I wrapped my arms around it, hoisted it, and carried it back to the kitchen. Heck and Busy were now reading the whole Wikipedia article about Molotov cocktails. I guess you're right, Minerva, said Heck. A Molotov cocktail is the wrong thing to bring to a candlelight vigil. It's more of a weapon. I can't believe you had to read that whole thing just to know I'm right, I told him. Fortunately, I found a candle we can use. Remind me what the candle is for? Asked Busy. Chapter 41. It seemed like the whole building had shown up to the vigil in the atrium. Every chair was filled, so I stood in the back, sweating under the weight of my candle that was as big as a campfire log. People were giving me the stink eye, because now all 4 wicks were lit, It smelled like a watermelon Jolly Rancher. Everyone else was holding little white candles that had been handed out by a volunteer. Heck and Busy had each gotten one and were now acting like they didn't know me. How were we supposed to know the candles would be provided? Dolores the Wit was sitting near the front. Because I was standing up, I could see that the glow lighting her face didn't come from a flame. It came from the screen of her phone. I could also see that she was looking at Etsy. She was so bored she was shopping. At 8 o'clock, she put her phone away and stood up in front of a table displaying framed photos of Kermit, Serenity, Young Jay, and Oscar. Many of you complained to me about the recent poisonings, she told the crowd, and I get it. You're afraid for your lives and your property values. Dolores had been Oscar's supervisor for years, but she didn't sound sad at all. She sounded like a principal lecturing students about bad behavior. When she spotted me, and her voice got super dramatic. Remember that the murderer could be someone you'd never expect, even someone as innocent seeming as a schoolgirl, she said, locking her eyes on mine. So until we catch her, stay alert. Report anyone you see snooping around or doing anything unusual, and always lock your doors. The squirmed people started looking at me again. Dolores had all but said I was guilty. Then Fred Frizzle, the board president, stood up. His sad eyes and whiskered face reminded me of a seal in the Lincoln Park Zoo. Please join me in a moment of silence for our neighbors, said Fred solemnly. As everyone bowed their heads, I stared at the pictures on the table, thinking how strange it was to see all of them smiling and looking happy. I might have been the only one in the atrium who kept her eyes open, which was a good thing, since I saw that Dolores was sneaking away. I elbowed Heck, who opened his eyes. We have to follow her, I mouthed. He didn't need to be told twice. Leaving Busy, whose eyes were still tightly shut, we tiptoed through the crowd after Dolores. She could have been leaving because she was bored. Or what if Dolores was the murderer? With everyone in the atrium, it would have been easy for her to plant the poison for her next victim, unless we stopped her. We watched as Dolores hurried into the rear hallway, but before we followed her in, we blew out our candles. We couldn't let her see the flickering flames or have the smell of watermelon-flavored candy give us away. Peering around the corner, we saw Dolores skulk past her own office with exaggerated footsteps like she was trying to be as quiet as possible. Our necks were stuck pretty far out when she suddenly stopped and whirled around. Heck and I pulled our heads back as fast as we could. Do you think she saw us? Whispered Heck. If she did, we'll know in a minute, I whispered back. But Dolores didn't come back to find us. When we looked again, she was at the far end of the hallway, pulling on the massive doors to our freight elevator. They seemed to be stuck. Then, all of a sudden, she almost fell over when they flew open. She stepped inside and was gone. Chapter 42. Dolores is smart, I told Heck as we hurried down to the end of the hallway. Evil, but smart. The numbers on the elevator indicator were rising as Dolores went up. 2, 3, 4. What do you mean? Asked Heck. She knows this is the perfect time to commit a crime because nobody is watching, except us, said Heck. 5, 6, 7, and she reminded everyone to lock your doors when she's the only one who has a key to every unit in the building. Scary smart, agreed Heck. But where's she going? We watched as the freight elevator continued to climb floors. 8, 9. It finally stopped on 10. She was going after someone else on Mr. Park's floor. I pushed a button and the elevator started coming back down. The building was so quiet that we could hear Fred Fizzle's voice echoing from the atrium. The moment of silence had ended. As we grieved for our neighbor Serenity and our employee Oscar, and prayed for the recoveries of Kermit and young Jay, all of them much loved members of our community, it is important that we remember them as healthy, vibrant, and alive. We'll never catch up with her, complained Heck. This elevator is so slow. When it came, we scrambled inside. Its doors opened from the top and bottom, not the sides, and its one floor was big enough to move a grand piano. We paced nervously as we rode up to the 10th floor. On the balcony, every door was closed and Dolores was nowhere to be seen. She has to be in one of those apartments, I said. Maybe she forgot to lock the door behind her. You take that side and I'll take this side. While Heck took off in the other direction, I turned the handle of the nearest door. It was locked and didn't budge. Far below us, Fred Frizzle's kind words were interrupted by an angry shout. It's too bad about Oscar and the others, but what about the rest of us? Who will be the next to die? I looked over the railing and saw the big, bald bodybuilder shaking his fist at Fred. He lived on this floor. Dolores could be in his apartment at that very moment. Fred pleaded with him, probably hoping he wouldn't hulk out. This is a candlelight vigil, not a co-op meeting. As I continued turning doorknobs, I could hear arguments echoing up from below. We can't wait for the meeting, said the bodybuilder. My picture could be at that table tomorrow. We elected you our leader, Fred, so lead us, scolded a woman who sounded like the sweet old lady who bought Hex cookies. Please calm yourselves, begged Fred, as though the crowd was carrying torches and pitchforks, not little candles. The detective in charge assures me he has his very best people on the case. Was I one of Detective Taylor's very best people? I turned doorknobs frantically, racing from apartment to apartment, but so far every single one was locked. Where was Dolores DeWitt? Far below us. I heard chairs scraping as people began to storm out. The vigil was over. Heck and I were about to meet up at the passenger elevator. We still had seen no sign of Dolores. There was only one more door on my side to check. 102. 1002. Mr. Park's apartment. I almost skipped it because he was already in the hospital clinging to life. The good detective leaves no handle unturned. Heck caught up with me just as I got there. But before I could even touch the doorknob, it turned on its own. The floor flew open and Dolores DeWitt stepped out. She stared down on us with a wicked grin. Caught you, she said. Case files. Dolores DeWitt. Occupation, building manager. Relationship to case, she suspects me and I suspect her. Hair, rat-colored. Eyes, beady, squinty, and shifty. Age, older than my parents, younger than my grandparents. Still pretty old. Identifying characteristics. Voice sounds like sandpaper on a chalkboard. Has two hairy, disgusting moles on her face. Ew! Personality? Unpleasant, unlikable, and unlikely to improve. Habits, behavior, and special talents. Online shopaholic. Obsessed with eBay and Etsy. Detective's notes. Dolores DeWitt is supposed to make sure everything runs smoothly at our building, keeping it safe and well and clean and well repaired. But she actually spends all her time scaring babies, kicking dogs, and brewing poison. I don't have proof of these things, but I will find it. She definitely does not like kids, or fun, or kids who have fun. I didn't know Dolores as a kid, because I am not 50 years old. But if I did, we would have not been friends, because I could tell that even when she was a kid, she didn't like kids. She probably sucked up to grown-ups and tailed on other kids when they did something wrong. I know Dolores is guilty, but how can I prove it? Chapter 43. Are you kidding? We caught you, I told Dolores. Doing what? She asked innocently, checking to make sure the gas and water were turned off in an occupied apartment. That's my job. You were covering your tracks, I insisted, even though I knew Detective Taylor's crime scene team had already combed the apartment for evidence. And you were breaking in, said Dolores, which you can explain to your ditzy cousin and to the police. She locked Mr. Park's door with a key from a ring that was as large as a Nerf basketball hoop. Then she marched us to the passenger elevator. A handful of people spilled out as we arrived, but they were arguing and hardly seemed to notice us. On the second floor, Dolores rapped sharply on the door and waited for Busy to answer. Is everything okay? Asked our cousin when she saw us. I opened my eyes and you were gone. That's because the low delinquents were breaking into young Jay's Park's apartment, said Dolores triumphantly. Busy's eyes widened. Is this true? Well, technically, began Heck. No, I yelled. I'll be filling an official report since I'm a witness, said Dolores. You seem to be a terrible guardian, but I hope you can at least keep them out of trouble until the police arrive to question them. Busy appeared even more confused than usual. She looked at Heck, then at me, then at Dolores, obviously unsure what to say. She will, I answered for her. Won't you, Busy? I guess so, said my cousin softly. When Dolores turned and walked away, I may or may not have made a rude face that definitely would have gotten me detention at school. Busy followed us inside and closed the door. What just happened? Dolores laid a trap for us, I said, mad at myself for walking right into it. Either she saw us behind her or smelled my stupid candle. Then she waited until we caught up. Maybe after she got out of the freight elevator, she noticed it going down and realized we were coming up after her, suggested Heck. I snapped at my fingers. Then she had Mr. Park's apartment so we wouldn't know who she's actually targeting next. Busy sat down on the bench by her front door, took off one shoe, and stared at it. I still don't understand. I think Dolores DeWitt is the murderer, I told her. Do you have any evidence to prove that? Asked Busy. That's what we're trying to get, said Heck. But now you look guilty too, said Busy, putting her shoe back on and trying it like she forgot she'd just taken it off. You shouldn't break the rules to catch someone else breaking the rules. Not even when it's life or death? I asked. That sounds like a question for a philosopher like your mom, she said. I should probably ask your parents how they want me to handle this. Or you could wait a little while until everything calms down, I suggested. Heck gave me a worried look. Our parents don't like getting bad news when they're traveling. Busy shook her head. I'm going to give them a call. When they asked me to look after you guys, I never dreamed you actually get in trouble. Chapter 44. Grounded? What do you mean we're grounded? I asked. Heck and I were standing in the doorways of our rooms, staring at the phone in Busy's hands. Dad's furious face frowned out at us from its tiny screen. After Busy told him about the trouble with Dolores, he didn't waste any time in punishing us. I couldn't believe it. We had never been grounded before. It seemed like something that had only happened to kids in books and movies. So how does it work? Asked Heck. We just stay home? I don't want you to set fire to the apartment for the next 24 hours, said Dad. Except for school, obviously, I said. He shook his head. I wasn't sure I'd ever seen him so mad. You're both going to stay home tomorrow and study with Busy. I already received an email from Dolores stating that you were trespassing in another resident's apartment and that she's reporting it to the police. This is serious, Minerva. This is total garbage, said Heck. Mom's face appeared as she took the phone from Dad. Kids, this detective stuff is getting out of hand. I mean, do you really think the building manager is a murderer? When she gets away with one, don't blame us, I yelled. Don't leave the apartment until we figure out what to do next, said Dad, taking the phone back. And remember, while we're gone, your cousin is in charge. What she says goes. The screen went black as he ended the call. Busy stood in the hallway looking miserable. I'm sorry, you guys, she said. I don't like this any better than you do, but you better do what your parents told you. Heck slowly closed the door to his room. I slammed mine. Busy had always been more like a big sister than a babysitter. Most of the time, I feel like I'm taking care of her. But now she was our warden, and we were her prisoners. I grabbed my phone and texted Mom and Dad, spamming them with angry emojis. Everybody was treating us like we were just some stupid kids when we were the only ones who really knew what was happening. Through the vent, I heard computer keys clicking. Heck was online. I flopped down on my bed so I could talk to him. We're supposed to spend all day tomorrow with Busy, I groaned. While we're stuck inside, Dolores can run around poisoning all the people she wants. Heck's voice sounded distracted. Don't worry about it. What do you mean, don't worry about it? Tell Santos to pretend he's sick or something and is here tomorrow morning, he said. I have a plan. Now excuse me while I make us a midnight snack. I don't want a snack, I told him, but he had already left his room. I could hear his footsteps going down the hallway. How could you even think of eating at a time like this? Chapter 45. When I woke up on Friday morning, my stomach felt as round and hard as a watermelon. It felt like I had swallowed a watermelon. It felt like I had swallowed a watermelon. I could hardly move without groaning in agony. Was this what it was like to be poisoned? Heck opened the door to my room. His hair stuck out in all directions like someone had rubbed his head with a balloon. How are you feeling? He asked. Like I'm about to explode, I told him. Good, he said. Heck's midnight snack had been more like a death notice prisoner's last meal, if food was the method of execution. The 3-course meal was the worst thing he had ever prepared in his life. Huge pieces of raw broccoli and cauliflower. Piles of 3-bean salad made from undercooked navy beans, pinto beans, and lima beans. Bucket-sized cabbage kale arugula smoothies. Are you ready? Asked Heck. I just hope we don't kill ourselves, I said, or anyone else. I climbed out of bed, feeling like the watermelon might shoot out of my butt at any moment. As we went down the hall, my stomach made a weird, echoey sound like a demon yodeling in a cavern under a volcano. Heck looked over his shoulder at me and grinned. Busy was already awake and studying in the dining room. Her laptop, books, and papers covered the whole table. I'm going to have to ask you guys to be super quiet today, because I have an important deadline for my dissertation tomorrow, she said. I really need to concentrate. I understand, I assured her. Heck and I walled over to the table like we were holding potato chips between our butt cheeks and trying not to break them. The pressure below my belly was painfully intense. The night before, Heck had been researching which foods caused the most gas, and obviously he had done his homework. We were poised to unleash the biggest fart storm ever smelled in Chicago. As the air turned foul with the aroma of rotten eggs and fancy cheese, I realized Heck had already let one slip, silent but deadly. Busy wrinkled her nose and gagged. "Oh, God! Who did that?" "Sorry," said Heck. "My stomach is upset, probably because I'm so upset about missing school." I fired next, a long, low ripper that lasted a full 30 seconds and sounded like someone playing a trumpet with an air hose. Pop, 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 pop. I didn't know it was even possible to become nauseated by smelling your own fart, but it was true. The odor of swamp gas and hot roadkill made me want to barf, which made me fart again. This one came out like rapid fire, like bursts from a machine gun, each one stinkier than the last. Blat, 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 blat. Now Heck was really letting loose. He rose out of his chair, propelled by his own gas, as he fired a salvo of disgustingly wet stink bombs. Blurt, 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 blurt. Whoosh! "Oh my God, you guys!" shrieked Busy, pushing back from the table so hard her chair fell over. She ran to the nearest window, threw it open, and stuck her head outside. Her shoulders heaved as she sucked in fresh air. We followed her, showing no mercy. I couldn't believe I had left anything left in my stomach, but Heck, the gaseous gourmet, had outdone himself, and it seemed like our farts would never stop. We were just breaking wind. We weren't just breaking wind. We were destroying it. "So sorry," I told Busy. "I guess we're both feeling under the weather." "Probably something we ate," said Heck, trying not to laugh. "Get away from me!" she hollered, running into her room and slamming the door. We waited outside, our nostrils burning and eyes watering from the clouds of toxic gas. Flurp, flort, flap, florp, flap, 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 flap. Busy came out again, looking panicked, and shrieked, "I can smell it everywhere!" Coughing and gagging, she stumbled back to the table and started stuffing books and papers into her backpack. "I can't stay here," she said as she grabbed her coat. "I'll never get any work done. Please don't tell your parents I left. I hope you feel better, but oh my God, this is disgusting!" Busy bolted out the door, and just like that, we were alone. Heck grinned and high-fived me as we both farted again. Flub, 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 flub. It smelled like the butt spray from a skunk who ate nothing but cabbage kale regular smoothies. "Now how do we make this stop?" I asked, pinching my nostrils shut. "We can't," said Heck cheerfully. "We just have to wait until we run out of gas." "I guess we better open some more windows," I said. But my phone vibrated with an incoming text from Detective Taylor. "We need to talk." Chapter 46. "Detective Club is now in session," I announced, holding my notebook and clicking my pen. Heck, Santos and I were sitting in a corner table in the elegant grind. Santos had gotten out of school by calling and pretending to be his dad. It was easy, he told us, since Mr. Salgado was even more silent than his son. The secretary had no idea what either of our voices sounded like. "Why can't we meet in your apartment?" asked Santos. "It's being fumigated," Heck told him. "Listen," I said. "Yesterday, Dolores laid a trap for us. Now it's our turn to lay a trap for her. But we have to hurry because Detective Taylor thinks we're at school, so we only have until the end of the day. There was another reason we had to hurry. I really needed to pass gas again, and I didn't want to do it inside the coffee shop where everyone would know it was me." "What kind of trap?" asked Santos. "We'll wait outside her office and follow her. When she tries to poison someone, we'll use our phones to get the evidence Detective Taylor needs to close the case." "Don't you think she'll just catch us again?" asked Heck. "She thinks we're grounded, so we won't even be expecting us," I told him. Santos looked like the words he was about to say are going to hurt his mouth, but he said them anyway. "Sometimes it's better to be afraid." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Because it makes you more careful," he said. "I think it will work better if we split up and hide." After he explained, I realized Santos was right. His plan was better. Maybe he used all the time he saved by not talking to do some extra thinking. Or maybe he kept quiet so he wouldn't have to let everybody know how smart he was. Either way, I was glad he was on our team. When we left the coffee shop, Heck and I both farted so suddenly that Santos ran halfway down the block. Back at the Arcanum, Heck stationed himself in a mop closet by the alley door in case Dolores sneaked out the back. He had so many cleaning supplies in his backpack, it was like he was going camping. He had so many supplies in his backpack, it was like he was going camping. A blanket and pillow, a gourmet picnic lunch, noise-canceling headphones, and his Nintendo Switch. Try not to get distracted, I warned him. Don't worry, he said. If she gets past me, I'll just catch her on my skateboard. Santos hid in a shadowy corner of the lounge, sinking deep into a leather chair where he could watch the lobby and the front door. Heck had given him a GoPro on a hand mount so he could record everything like a security camera. Don't get too comfortable and fall asleep, I cautioned Santos. I'm too nervous to sleep, he said. I rode the elevator to the very top of the atrium. From the 12th floor, I could see the doors to every apartment except the penthouse on the roof. When Dolores came up at the elevator, I would know exactly where she got off and which apartment she entered. Everyone ready? I texted our group chat. We had all our phones put on vibrate so nobody would hear us. Ready, Santos texted back immediately. My brother didn't reply. Heck, are you paying attention? I texted. He answered a little while later. Sorry, had to smash Wario. I didn't know how Heck could be so chill when I could hardly stop pacing. I circled the balcony, never taking my eyes off Dolores' office door. It was time to put an end to her reign of terror. My heart was pumping hard, but I was prepared. I was psyched. I was ready to go. I was... Chapter 47. I was bored out of my mind? In TV shows, detectives on stakeouts sit in their cars, drinking coffee and eating junk food until something exciting happens, but the boring parts are edited out. So far, our stakeout was the only boring parts. Was this what Detective Taylor's job was really like? The only good news was that I had finally stopped farting. Well, mostly. I thought Dolores would start her work day by poisoning someone right away, but so far, she hadn't come out of our office once. The most exciting thing I saw was the janitors cleaning up the lobby, which was still a mess from last night. I paced back and forth while they floated and stacked up chairs and swept up discarded candles and crumpled flyers. They left the pictures of Kermit, Serenity, Young Jay, and Oscar on the table. Earlier that morning, I had seen that the glass in Kermit's picture frame had cracked when someone knocked it over, but the picture is still hanging in there, just like Kermit. Have either of you seen anything? I texted the other two members of the Detective Club. Santos sent us a gif of some comedian shaking his head. Nope. Hex sent a video file. I opened it up and pressed play. It started with a rat's eye view of the alley. Then Hex skated towards the police phone's camera like he was determined to crush it with his trucks. At the last second, though, he ollied and jumped over. Sick trick, texted Santos. Aren't you supposed to be watching the back door? I texted. It was hot in the closet, Heck wrote back. But don't worry. I'll see her if she comes out. Anyone want to play Among Us? Okay, answered Santos. A quick game couldn't hurt, I supposed. I glanced down before writing my reply. What I saw nearly made me drop my phone off the balcony. Dolores was on the move. Chapter 48. Ducking down so Dolores couldn't see me, I tracked her through the spaces of the railing of the 12th floor balcony. She's out of her office, I texted, crossing the lobby. Headed where? Heck wanted to know. I didn't know. She walked toward the elevator and then went right past it. When I realized her destination, I tapped out an update. The bathroom. You better follow her just to be sure. The girls' bathroom? Asked Heck. Who, me? Asked Santos. She might be mixing poison in the sink, I texted. I had to give Santos credit because he went after her. Leaving his hiding place, he sneaked across the atrium. Even though his face was as small as my fingernail, I could have sworn I saw him gulp. He stopped at the women's restroom and put his ear against the door. Then he turned and ran away like his heels were on fire. What happened? I texted. He didn't answer. Far below me, Dora stepped out of the bathroom and looked around suspiciously, and suddenly craned her neck and looked up. I dropped out of sight and flattened myself on the floor. Did she know we were watching her again? Finally, my phone vibrated. I heard the flush, Santos texted. I don't think she killed anybody in there, but she did do something really bad. What? Demanded Heck. She didn't wash her hands. What kind of monster doesn't wash her hands after using the toilet? Demanded Heck, whose caps lock seemed stuck. I didn't have time to answer because Dolores was on the move again and I didn't want to lose her. I watched as she walked away from the bathroom, got on the elevator, and started riding it up. I was out in the open. It was easy to spot as the spider in the bathtub. She was going to see me if she came up to my floor. Just like a spider in the bathtub, I started running helplessly back and forth. Fortunately, the elevator stopped on the 10th floor. She was almost directly under me. I crawled to the other side of the balcony until she finally came into view. Dolores DeWitt had stopped in front of apartment 1002. Mr. Park's apartment. Again. Why'd she keep returning to the scene of a crime? Dolores reached her huge key ring and turned it until she found the key she wanted. After looking both ways, she slid it into the lock, went inside, and closed the door behind her. I had been trying so hard to keep out of sight that I had completely forgotten to get any evidence. She went into Mr. Park's apartment. I updated the group. I'll get a picture of her coming out. Santos, make sure you get a video of her coming down the elevator and going back into her office. Santos texted a thumbs up. What about me? Texted Heck. Stay where you are and don't let her see you, I told him. He sent the swearing emoji. I guess he was mad about being left out. I rode the elevator down to 10 and hid in an alcove just down the hall from Mr. Park's door. Sticking my phone around the corner so only the camera lens was showing, I started recording a video. I watched the empty balcony on my screen for what seemed like forever. When Dolores finally came out, I knew why she returned to the scene of her crime. Chapter 49. Dolores was carrying Mr. Park's beautiful bronze sculpture of Lady Justice. It looked heavy. She almost dropped it while she was locking the door, and it was probably worth a ton of money, too. Lady Justice's blindfold meant she couldn't see who was stealing her, but I could. I kept recording video as Dolores locked the door and lugged her loot back down the elevator. She's coming down, I texted Santos and Heck. I risked a look over the railing and saw Santos crouched behind a large potted plant, using his GoPro to get a perfect shot of Dolores as she descended. He stood up for a better angle as she crossed the atrium and hurried down toward her office. But she didn't stop there. She kept going into the back hallway. Coming your way, Heck, Santos texted. As soon as Dolores was out of sight, I rode the elevator back down. Santos met me at the bottom when we hurried after Dolores. Heck was in his closet, but the door leading to the alley was cracked open. Cautiously, we peeked out. Dolores was 10 feet away and headed right for us. I pulled the door closed, hoping she would think the wind had blown it shut. Her key scraped in the lock as we sprinted back down the hallway, through the atrium, all the way to the lounge, where we crouched behind a big leather couch. The new doorman never even looked up from the sports section of the Chicago Sun-Times. Where the heck did Heck go? Whispered Santos. I had no idea, but a few minutes later, he rolled through the front door on a skateboard. I pulled him into the lounge so fast that his skateboard kept going without him. What happened? I asked. Heck was sweaty and excited. Dolores took that statue thingy outside into the alley, wrapped it in a blanket, and put it in the trunk of her car. Please tell me you got it on video, I begged. He tapped the GoPro strapped to his head. Every second. Okay, let's check everyone's phones to make sure we got enough evidence, I said. We sat down at the chess table and moved the pieces out of the way so we could watch our videos. Mine clearly showed Dolores taking Lady Justice from Mr. Park's apartment. Santos has captured her riding down the elevator and walking toward the back of the building. Hex caught her as she passed the janitor's closet and went out the back door. The camera glided as Hex skateboarded down toward the door, then did a crazy somersault when he crashed and wrecked. I ran into a radiator, Heck explained. Fortunately, my cash broke my fall. On the video, he picked himself up, hurried outside, and hid behind a dumpster where Dolores walked to her car. The statue was impossible to miss as she wrapped it up and stowed it into her trunk. I got locked out when she went back inside, which is why I had to go around the building, explained Heck. But now we have a perfect chain of evidence. She's poisoning people just so she can steal from them? Asked Santos. I guess so, I said. When the police check her phone and computer, they're going to find out that she's selling the stuff on eBay and Etsy. This is so sad, said Santos. Definitely, agreed Heck. But the good news is, we just ended her criminal career, I said. Then we heard Dolores' voice behind us. There they are, the little creeps! Arrest them, officer! Chapter 50. Detective Taylor and Dolores were standing in the lounge entrance. We've been so busy watching the videos that we haven't even noticed them. I did notice that Detective Taylor's tie looked like fruit salad that had been smashed with a sledgehammer. These are the criminal children I reported last night, Dolores told him. I was performing a routine check on Unit 1002 when I caught them trying to break in. Detective Taylor's expression was hard to read. I wanted to believe he was disgusted with Dolores as I was, but it looked more like he was disappointed in us. Why aren't you kids in school? He asked. Dolores butted in, happy that we also have been busted for skipping. They're probably planning to break into more apartments. And why not, since our lazy teachers and clueless guardians have no idea where they are? She didn't know we had followed her this time, so I just let her run her mouth. It was only going to be sweeter when I turned around and dunked on her. It's true that we should be in school, Heck confessed as Dolores grinned with delight. It's also true that Heck and I went to Mr. Park's apartment last night. It's so full of fascinating, valuable antiques, it's almost irresistible. Heck and Santos were looking at me like I had lost my mind. If Dolores had been any happier, she probably would have exploded. She obviously expected us to get us arrested while she got away with her crimes. She had no idea if she was facing checkmate. Are you saying Dolores is telling the truth? Asked Detective Taylor, looking almost sick. I shook my head. It's been driving us crazy trying to figure out why Dolores would hurt nice people like Kermit, Serenity, Oscar, and young Jay. Like you said, Detective Taylor, what's her motive? But now we know. Dolores turned white, then gray, then green as one by one we took our screens out to show Detective Taylor the videos, and one by one we pressed play. Chapter 51. Dolores' expression when Detective Taylor snapped the handcuffs around her wrist chilled me to the bone. If looks could kill, there would have been more one body in the morgue. You won't get away with this, she ranted. You'll have no idea who you're messing with, you little freaks. I'll make you pay! She lunged at me, getting so close I could see specks of food in the cracks of her yellowing teeth. But just as she whipped her neck forward and tried to headbutt me, Detective Taylor caught her by the shoulders and pulled her back. Try not to make things any worse for yourself, he told her. Actually, go ahead, even though my heart was pounding so hard I was hurting my ribs. Dolores had gone full werewolf in broad daylight. Her eyes were wild and her hair was practically standing on end as she wrestled with Detective Taylor. Finally, twisting her arm, he turned her around and marched her toward the front door. Come on, I'm going to need to take your statements too, he told us. We got into the back of Detective Taylor's car while he buckled Dolores into the passenger seat with her hands cuffed behind her back. Santos seemed nervous to be sitting behind her, especially because she kept turning her head to spray with saliva. When all this is over, you're going to wish you'd never been born, she screeched. Heck started taking pictures of her with her ugly Snapchat filters and showing them to her. One of these will make the perfect mug shot, he told her. That shut her up. At the police station, Detective Taylor told us to wait at his desk while he took Dolores through a door labeled interrogation. Can I watch? He asked. He shook his head. Sorry, Minerva, but I don't want to have to explain to a judge how he let a 12-year-old play bad cop while we got a suspect to confess. We need to make sure this holds up in court. I had my hands full keeping Heck out of trouble anyway. I found Detective Taylor's pepper spray and was planning to invent a new snack with a bag of chips he had bought from the vending machine. I'll call them Cop Shop Flaming Hots, said Heck, popping the bag open and getting ready to spread some with something that should only be used for self-defense. Are you crazy? Asked, grabbing the canister out of his hand and throwing it into Detective Taylor's desk drawer. First Molotov cocktails and now pepper spray. I have no idea how you survived until the 5th grade. Heck shoved a chip into his mouth and crunched it unhappily. This is seriously lacking in flavor. Santos came over. That guy over there says he'll show us some magic tricks, he told us. I looked up. That guy was Amazing Andy, who had apparently already been arrested again. His tuxedo was torn to frayed, but he was looking at us like a dog hoping for a treat. Don't stand too close unless you want your pockets emptied, I warned them as they eagerly rushed over for a show. I decided to skip it. Detective Taylor was gone for a long time. I figured it was just taking them a while to write down all the details from Dolores' murder confessions. Maybe she had poisoned more than the 4 people who knew about. If she was doing it in the building where she lived too, maybe we had even stopped the worst poisoner in Chicago. Maybe the world. When he finally came back to the detective's room, I expected him to be grinning from ear to ear because we closed the case. But he didn't look happy. Well, she confessed to stealing, he said, but she insists she didn't murder anyone. She's guilty, I said. She has to be. Detective Taylor slumped into his chair. We found the statue in your car, just like he said. And in her home, my team found valuable items that belonged to Kermit and Serenity. His internet history shows she was an active seller on e-commerce sites. Well, there you go, I said. He shook his head. But we haven't found any trace of the poisons she used. I could charge her for theft, but I still don't have a single piece of evidence that she's a murderer. Chapter 52. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I sat down into the chair next to Detective Taylor's desk and looked up at his weary face. He seemed just as frustrated as I was. But she went into their homes and after they were poisoned and stole stuff, I said. Isn't that proof? It definitely looks bad for her, he said. But she claims she stole from them only because they happened to be poisoned. I haven't had time to see if anything's missing from Oscar's apartment, but I'd be surprised if there is, since he didn't live in the building and she doesn't have his key. What if she killed Oscar because he figured out what she was doing? I asked. It's possible, Detective Taylor admitted. If nobody else gets poisoned while she's locked up here, doesn't that prove she did it? Not necessarily, said Detective Taylor. But the real culprit knows Dolores is under suspicion, so they might stop in order to make her look more guilty. Or not. It's also possible there are other victims we don't know about behind closed doors. That thought made my skin feel all prickly. If Serenity hadn't made it to the elevator before collapsing, nobody would ever have known she was poisoned. Lots of our neighbors lived alone. Shouldn't we check on everyone in the building? I asked, just to make sure they're okay. Detective Taylor nodded. You're right. Let's do it. Just then, Heck and Santos came back, looking very proud of themselves. That guy over there just showed us the coolest trick, said Santos. How to escape from handcuffs, said Heck, holding them up. He gave them to us as a souvenir. We all turned to look. Amazing Andy was gone. Where is he? Asked Detective Taylor. He said he had to go to a birthday party, said Heck. Wait here, said Detective Taylor as he jumped out and ran out of the room. Oh no, said Santos, who seemed to have finally realized what had just happened. Disgusted, I rolled my eyes at the other members of the Detective Club. You guys do realize that they were trying to catch criminals, not let them go, right? Chapter 53. Lights were glowing in the windows of the Arcanum by the time we finally got back from the police station. It had taken Detective Taylor almost an hour to catch Amazing Andy. As we climbed out of his car into the sidewalk, the chilly breeze rattled the dead leaves into the gutter. My team is still tied up searching Dolores' house, he told us. Do you want to help me knock on doors? Just try and stop me, I said, while Heck nodded in agreement. Detective Taylor showed his badge to a replacement doorman, and we headed inside. This is what police call a wellness check, he explained to us. All we're doing is checking to see if anyone needs help. What if there's no answer? I asked. Write down the apartment number so I could go in using Dolores' keys if necessary, said Detective Taylor. But some people just might not be home from work yet, or they could be out of town. Got it, said Heck. Detective Taylor craned his neck as he came to the balconies rising above us. We'll cover more ground if we split up into two teams, Minerva. You and Santos take the even-numbered floors, and Heck and I will take the odd-numbered floors. I was so eager to get started that I was practically running in place. What are we waiting for? I could use more detectives like you, he said, grinning at me. Santos and I got off the elevator on 2, and Heck and Detective Taylor rode up to 3. We worked fast, knocking on doors and writing down what happened before moving on. On a new page of my notebook, I had listed the apartment numbers followed by columns labeled No Problem and No Answer. On the 8 units on the second floor, 5 people answered the door, looked at us funny, and told us everything was fine. I marked those No Problem. Only 2 were No Answer. The remaining one was our own apartment. I decided to check and see if Busy had gotten back from the University of Chicago yet. If she had, I needed to tell her why Heck and I weren't home like we were supposed to be. She would have to tell our parents, but Dolores' arrest meant we probably wouldn't get in trouble. Do you have a key? Santos asked, and I knocked on the door. Yes, but I don't want to startle her, I told him. When Busy didn't answer, I turned to go, thinking she was probably still at school. Santos stopped me. Wait a minute, I heard something. For a moment, all I could hear was Heck and Detective Taylor knocking on doors above us. Then there was a soft sliding sound, like socks on a hardwood floor, followed by a bump. I dug in my pocket for the key and opened the door. The lights weren't on, so it took me a few seconds to see Busy feeling her way along the hall towards us. Busy? I asked. Are you all right? As she got closer, I could hear her gasping for breath. I sniffed just to make sure she wasn't still gagging from my gas attack, but the open windows had done their job and cleared the air. What's wrong? I asked as I switched on the light. Busy looked at me with eyes wide from terror. She tried to say something, but it was like her throat was clogged. Her voice was a strangled hiss. Poison, she gasped. Poison! Chapter 54. Everything happened so fast after that. Busy collapsed. We screamed for help. Santos fainted. Or maybe Santos screamed for help and I fainted. It was kind of a blur. Detective Taylor got there so quickly, I think he must have climbed down from the balcony. Now that I think about it, it was Santos who fainted, not me. But the whole thing felt so unreal, I could hardly believe it was happening. I did chest compressions on Busy while Detective Taylor called for help on his police radio. I guess that worked even faster than calling 911, because Big John and Little John got there before I finished singing Rumor Has It in my head. I think it was in my head. You're getting pretty good at this, Minerva, Big Joan told me as she took over. I don't want to have to be good at this, I told her. Little John woke up Santos with smelling salts again and then put an oxygen bag on Busy. The teddy bear tattoo on his bicep bulged as he helped Big Joan lift a gurney. The next thing I knew, Santos and I were in the backseat of Detective Taylor's car again. This time we held on for dear life as he weaved through traffic, following the smoking tires of the ambulance toward Dusable Hospital. Man, she's fast, said Detective Taylor with a whistle, admiring Big Joan's driving. Through the windows and the ambulance back doors, I could see Little John squeezing the oxygen bag to keep Busy alive. He must have strapped her down tightly because the stretcher didn't budge, even when Big John made the boxy ambulance drift around the corner like she was in the Fast and the Furious. For some reason, all I could think about was Disney World, and not just because I would rather have been in the Magic Kingdom in Chicago. The day I had spent there with my cousin was my favorite memory of all time. Not because she had spent 15 minutes talking to Woody from Toy Story without realizing he was 7 feet tall and made out of foam. How was I supposed to know he wasn't a real cowboy, she said after I clued her in. And not because she crossed the street, got caught in the Disney World parade, and just kept going. And it wasn't even because we were in boarding Splash Mountain. She somehow didn't get a seat and went through the whole ride sitting on top of the giant log. Only my cousin could be the real source of an amusement at an amusement park. The real reason that day was my favorite was because I dropped my ice cream in some horse poop. Well, not that, but what happened afterward. A horse pulling a trolley had just dropped a streaming load of doo-doo on Main Street, USA. And before the guy with the broom could sweep it up, my melting ball of ice cream chose that exact spot to swan dive off my cone. Busy didn't laugh. She didn't even hesitate. Want mine? She said, even though she hadn't taken a lick, because she's basically one of the nicest people in the whole world. Is Busy going to be okay? I practically whispered as the hospital came into view. I was almost afraid to say it out loud because I was afraid of the answer. Detective Taylor didn't say anything. He didn't know either. Chapter 55. Detective Taylor took charge of the ER, hurrying over to the intake nurse while Big John and Little John rolled Busy inside. But from the way he was shaking his head, I could tell he didn't like what she was saying. I moved closer so I could hear, and Heck and Santos came with me. Then Detective Taylor pointed at us. These kids are our cousins, he told the nurse, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let her become another body in the morgue. So I want you to go back there and find a bed for her now. Yes, sir, the nurse gulped before hurrying away. Detective Taylor's a tough guy, whispered Heck. I'm glad he's our tough guy, I whispered back. Detective Taylor walked over to us. She said they were full up, but she'll find something, he said. That's good news. What's the bad news? I asked. She also told me that young Jay Park didn't make it. That made 3 victims. Santos and I hadn't saved him after all. We tried our best, I told Santos, feeling sick to my stomach. Moments later, the nurse returned with a doctor and an orderly. We all watched as they rushed Busy into an area labeled Hospital Staff Only. Detective Taylor's cell phone rang and moved away to take the call. When he came back, he looked like he heard some encouraging news. As soon as I can get more officers to help, I'm going back to the Arcanum and we're going to pound on every single door until we're sure everyone is safe, he said. But first I have to go to talk to some people who might have some important information. I'll be in touch. He hurried out to his car, leaving us alone in the waiting room. Now that your baby Sarah is in the hospital, who's looking after you? I asked Santos. She's not our baby Sarah, I told him. We can look after ourselves. We should tell Mom and Dad, though, said Heck. He was right. I called them on FaceTime, and they answered. Their phone was bouncing around so much it took me a second to see that Dad was driving a speedboat, bumping up and down the waves. He and Mom were both wearing wetsuits and scuba gear with big knives strapped to their belts. We're kind of busy at the moment, Minerva, said Dad. I could hardly hear him because of the wind whipping past his phone. Busy's in the hospital, I shouted. We think she's been poisoned. Mom and Dad looked at each other. Dad was probably wondering how someone from our own family could have gotten hurt when there was such a statistically small chance of it happening. But for once, he said something I wanted to hear. As he turned the wheel of the boat sharply, heading back to shore, he said, "We'll be there as soon as we can. Unfortunately, it's going to take at least 36 hours before we can get to Chicago." "I'll call Aunt Arabella and tell her about Busy," said Mom. "Stay safe." "I want to," I told her. "But how?" Obviously, no one knew the answer to that. "You'll figure it out," said Dad. Okie dokie. That's it for part 2. Stay tuned for the final conclusion of part 3. So be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe down below, and I will see you next time. Take care, everybody. So long.